The United Kingdom's search for its next Prime Minister. The final two contenders, that is the former British Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak and the British Foreign Minister Liz Truss, have promised a more hawkish stance on China. Now, both candidates have yet again clashed over who would take the tougher stance in China once they assume power at 10 Downing Street. Now, Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer in the United Kingdom, has said that China represents the largest threat to Britain and also to the world's security order. He also further proposed a series of measures to reduce Beijing's influence in the United Kingdom. However, Liz Truss, on the other hand, has asserted as to how Sunak had been pretty soft on China and had also even planned to hold a UK-China economic and finance conference. And apart from this, Liz Truss, who's campaigning as the foreign policy hawk, claimed that she had been much more willing than the former Chancellor of the Exchequer to stand up to Beijing. Now, in a rebuttal, Rishi Sunak has pledged to close down all Confucius institutes which teach Mandarin in universities and schools but are linked to the Chinese Communist Party. The Sunak's team has also further pointed out that 9 out of the 31 Confucius institutes in the United Kingdom had been established at a time when Liz Truss had been the education minister between 2012 and 2014. In a statement, he said, and I quote him here, "Enough is enough. For too long, politicians in Britain and across the West have rolled out the red carpet and have turned a blind eye to China's nefarious activity and ambitions." The shift to China is the latest rub in the breakout between the candidates after major clashes on the issues of taxation and economic policy. And it comes after both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss sought over the weekend to outdo each other on tougher immigration policies. Now, Rishi Sunak has hinted that he would want to clamp down on the number of people who are fleeing war and persecution abroad who are seeking asylum in the United Kingdom. On the other hand, Liz Truss has said that she would be striking more deals with third countries such as Rwanda to process asylum claims made in the United Kingdom. Now, both contenders are vying the support of nearly about 160,000 Conservative Party members who will begin voting early in the month of August to choose the next leader of the Tory party who would go on to be the next Prime Minister of Britain. Now, to give us more insights in terms of how this contest, of course, is playing out, we've joined in by our correspondent Julia Chapman, who's joining us from London. Julia, this is an interesting turn of events where the election is to decide the next Tory leader, and both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have been having a go at each other on who is likely to take a much harder stance in China. What are we to read from these exchanges? Is this just election rhetoric, or do these leaders intend to follow through on some of the things that they've been saying, like closing down the Confucius institutes?
Well, it certainly does sound as though candidate Rishi Sunak is likely to put a much harder stance against China if he is to become Prime Minister. He has today been trying to make that the next big campaign issue here in the UK on the day that he and Liz Truss will go head-to-head in their first debate since being chosen as the final two candidates for the position of leader of the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, the person who will ultimately become the Prime Minister following on from Boris Johnson. So far, this campaign has been dominated by issues of tax and economic policy, as you say. Now, Rishi Sunak's camp is trying to shift the agenda slightly towards foreign affairs and national security, and he has issued a pretty broad charge sheet against China, accusing the country of stealing British technology, infiltrating universities here in the UK, bullying its neighbours, propping up what he called Putin's fascist invasion of Ukraine, and saddling developing countries with insurmountable debt. So really taking a very tough stance on the economic superpower that is China. Of course, about 10 years ago, under David Cameron's government, there was really a movement to become closer to China, to develop the economic partnership. The mood has very much changed since then, and now both candidates are seeking to distance themselves from China. Rishi Sunak insisting that Liz Truss, as Foreign Secretary of the UK, hadn't done enough to do that. She has accused Rishi Sunak of hypocrisy, but that is likely to be one of the major talking points in the debate this evening as the two candidates go head to head to try to convince the Conservative membership that they will be the best candidate for the job of Prime Minister of the UK.
Absolutely, indeed. It'll be interesting to see as to what is, of course, said over the course of the next few weeks as these two leaders go head to head. Now, another aspect, Julia, that I want you to weigh in on is that Boris Johnson had been the loudest voice of support for Ukraine in the war that Russia is waging on Ukraine. Now, with the change of guard at 10 Downing Street, do we expect any kind of a change in British policy so far as the Russian war in Ukraine is concerned?
Not a particularly significant one. Of course, both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss were, and indeed Liz Truss still is, a member of Boris Johnson's cabinet. They have been working with Boris Johnson to give more economic support to Ukraine, to buy weapons, helping train Ukrainian soldiers. There are 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers currently in Britain training with the British Army to better fight Russia. And indeed, we have seen the UK trying to be part of this Western coalition of sanctions against Russia as well. It has been one of the toughest countries when it comes to sanctioning Russia. We are not expecting a major shift in policy on Ukraine, but undoubtedly there are some concerns in Kyiv that nobody will be quite the biggest champion of the Ukrainian cause in British politics as Boris Johnson has been. Of course, now that we are seeing a building cost of living crisis here in the UK, partly due to the rising cost in energy over uncertainty from the Russian supply in Europe, we are starting to see some of these consequences hitting home here in the UK. And it could be suggested that the British public is starting to get fatigued with a very expensive bill of supporting Ukraine. Now, of course, Western leaders are urging patience and solidarity in the face of what they say is aggression from Russia, insisting that they must stay the course of these sanctions and this support for Ukraine, because they warn that without it, Russia will feel entitled to not just take Ukraine, but try to go even further. And they say that would be a huge threat to democracy all across the world.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Julia Chapman, for joining us and getting us all those insights from London. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.